C-5 still going strong. Yeah, they put new engines on them, so they're. I've heard they're more reliable than C-17s now.
Really?
The joke was always like C-5s break all the time.
Yeah, because C-17's newer, isn't it?
It is a lot newer, but they've gotten beaten up a lot.
Yeah.
Past like 20, 30 years, they've just gotten blown so much.
Oh, yeah.
You know, in the Middle East too, which is like really hard on airplanes. You know, desert,
dust,
sun. Yeah, so heat, right? So like all things that are hard on airplanes. So yeah, no, it's a lot of fun. I mean, a lot of different type of flying than you did, but it's like an amazingly capable airplane considering its size, you know, because the C-17 has all these like electronic, you know, modes and like ways to augment the flaps, and
really
it has these things called spoilers, right? Which a lot of people don't probably know about, but like the spoilers have all these modes that effectively make it fly like a smaller airplane, you know?
Really?
So like it can maneuver better, stop in a shorter distance, you know, descend better, stuff like that. Like it has all these modes you can activate to sort of make it feel like a smaller airplane.
That's crazy. I saw it. I was in the gorge. I watched a C-17 on a low level.
Like at a concert?
Not at a concert, just traveling, you know? Like between,
there's a route that goes
right through there, right?
Right through the Columbia River gorge.
And I saw a C-17 below me.
Yeah, we can get down to 300 feet AGL, you know, which pretty low. I mean,
looked like they were having a good time.
Yeah, it's fun.
Have you done those?
Yeah, I've done that exact low level. Yeah, it's pretty exciting being at like 300 feet in a, you know, pretty big airplane. Yeah, I mean the wingspan of C-17 is like 170 feet, so you're basically 2 wingspans above the ground. It's low.
Great.
But yeah, I mean the reason why we do that training is because like if you had to go into a hostile environment, fly low, right? Theoretically, harder to see that way.
Either really low or really high, right?
Really low or really high, yeah, depending.
I mean, you can't get high enough to outrun sand.
No, I mean, there's, especially nowadays, there's so many crazy threats out there. Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah, things we can't talk about in too much detail.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's, you practice all these things and, you know, you hope if you're ever doing the real thing or you're in combat, you're like, you have the skills to do whatever tactics to stay safe. Yeah.
So when you sign up for the pilot commitment, that's 8 years, right?
10 years.
10 years now.
Yeah, 10 years after pilot training.
I think, okay.
Was it different for you? Or?
I thought it was 8. But
they keep making it more and more. I think there was some talk about making it like 15 or something.
Maybe, you know, I don't know. It depends on.
I mean,
but you'd have to have a pretty sweet deal to make it 15.
Yeah, I mean, you always look too good.
Yeah.
You you know, you're an expensive government asset by the time you're done with pilot training.
Yeah, right.
They want to get their money's worth out of you. And I think it costs over $1 million to train a pilot or something.
Per person, right?
Per person.
I can totally see that.
Roughly.
At least that. I mean, depending on, I'm sure it's different per airplane. No, but
I think just to get through pilot training.
Yeah, just the.
I think just because of the jet
just
fuel
undergraduate
and,
pilot training. Right?
You know, the amount of fuel and I don't know. It's not a cheap thing to do, fly airplanes.
Right. $1 million education.
Something like that. I mean, that's.
Yeah. It wouldn't surprise me if it was even more than that.
I've heard that anecdotally. But yeah, I mean, it's becoming more like in simulators and stuff. So it might be cheaper now.
You're right. They do
because they have like the VR goggles now and stuff like that.
They can replace some flying time with simulator time. They're trying to eat away at flying time.
I think they're replacing a lot of flying time with simulator time, which has been kind of controversial. Like a lot of people think they're, you know, the product is not as good because
they've gone too far.
Well, because you just can't fully replicate flying an airplane.
Right.
Like simulators are amazing now. You know, the goggles and the virtual reality, but there's no substitute for being in an actual airplane. I mean,
I'm sure the Air Force has budgets and they try to they probably have some different trade-offs. We could train one more pilot versus like two pilots instead of one.
Yeah.
And get two pilots instead of one for the same price.
Yeah. I mean, there's people who are smarter about it than I am, but there's a lot of budgetary constraints nowadays. I mean, it's hard to like believe because the DoD budget is so massive, but
right.
We're not like in a huge conflict right now either. So like I don't know if you can call it peacetime, but like, in a times where we're not in a big overseas war, funding is just harder to come by, right?
Yep.
Like back in the Cold War days, sure, they were just writing blank checks, right? Like whatever you want,
Yep.
Military, here you go. But in slower times, I guess you could say like they just try to save money, right? Allocate money towards other things in the government or
we're definitely in a contraction period.
Contraction period, yeah. That's a good way to put it.
So you were in the C-17. When does your commitment end? And you had the option to keep.
Yeah, 2021.
On? So okay, wow, that's wild.
10 years after pilot training.
Okay.
So, that's traditionally when a lot of people leave active duty,
go to the
become
airlines.
Reservists, go to the airlines. So
I did
all that.
Did you go to the airlines back then?
Yeah, I left active duty. Summer of 2021. I got a reserve job. Started applying to airlines. It was kind of a weird time because it was, mid-pandemic still.
Yep.
The airlines were actually not hiring when I left active duty, which was kind of nerve-wracking.
Right, and then they needed to go crazy.
And then the floodgates opened. But when I separated, it was like pretty uncertain. I didn't know what was going to happen, honestly. So we moved across the country. From we were living in Philadelphia. Sold our house in Philly, moved out here. Luckily, I had a reserve job, so I knew I at least had that, insurance and a way to make decent money, and then at least pay the bills and have insurance, right? And the airline started hiring in like the fall of 2021, and I was lucky enough to get on with Delta early 2022. Been there since, so
nice.
Yeah, I mean it's insane how many pilots they've hired the past few years. There's like 6,000 pilots who are junior to me.
Yeah, I heard they're taking pilots at the minimum.
Yeah, I don't know.
Is that true?
I don't know, honestly. I mean, everyone I've met has been like very qualified. So, I mean, the minimums to be an airline pilot are still pretty high.
Right.
Like
it's true.
You hear that in like the media and, the public's probably like, oh my God, like who's flying these planes?
Yeah, but I don't say it to cause fear.
Yeah, I know, but like, someone who's not a pilot, right? Like they might hear that and think like, who are these, these clowns flying airplanes?
But you used to have to fly like a commuter job for a while before you got into the majors.
I think it was a harder nut to crack, but I mean, the minimums are still like 1,500 hours or if I'm not mistaken, which it's a lot of hours. Like, you're definitely a competent pilot by that point. I think back in the day, it was so competitive.
Exactly.
You wouldn't get a job offer unless you had like 3,000, 4,000 hours. But I mean, honestly, like, especially as a cargo pilot, a lot of those hours are kind of like empty hours anyway. Like if you have 1,000 hours in an F-16 versus like 3,000 in the C-17, every minute of your 1,000 F-16 hours are probably pretty action packed, right? But in the C-17, you're spending 7, 8, 9 hours at a time just crossing the ocean.
You're logging a lot of hours.
You're logging a lot of hours, but you're not like hand flying the plane when you're just at cruise over the Pacific, right?
Yeah, you're right about action packed. That's for
sure.
So
not all hours are created equal.
Right.
But I think the people they're hiring are still very competent. It's just they needed pilots badly, right? So like, 5,000, 6,000 people got hired after me, and I've only been there for a few years. That's crazy.
That's probably two things happened, right? A lot of people took the retirement or said, I'm out, and then a lot of people, and then the economy took off again, right?
Yeah, the economy took off. Travel, like revenge travel, right? After the pandemic, a lot of people were like, chomping at the bit to go travel.
They're like, we can't get routes fast enough.
Yeah, because a lot of people just didn't go anywhere for a year or 2 or 3, so they were like ready to travel. And yeah, a lot of just guys and girls reaching retirement age, right? 65. So just kind of like a perfect storm of like retirements at the top end of the company, travel demand. Yeah, I feel super lucky. My timing was what it was. Lately, they've kind of paused hiring.
Did they? They're
Yeah,
like,
which I
yeah,
think it'll
enough.
pick up again later this year. But, just with tariffs and this, that, and the other, it's just been like kind of a crazy time
So
economically.
yeah, so they're pulling back and they're like waiting to see what's going to happen.
I think they're just kind of being cautious and like letting the world stabilize a little bit. I think we're all kind of looking forward to the world stabilizing a little bit.
So yeah, the timing of yours was pretty good because a lot of pilots were hired after you. So then you've got seniority from those pilots, right?
Yeah.
Are you
I'm like
first officer
top
or are
30%
you captain yet?
in my category now.
Okay.
I'm a first officer.
With more seniority than you would if you had to start over, right?
Yeah, I mean, being a captain, everyone who's a captain is generally more senior. It's all relative to which seat and which airplane you're in.
Yeah.
So I fly the A220 as a first officer, and I'm like top 30% now. That category, which is
the A220 a C-17 very similar?
Similar in a lot of ways. They're both sticks, similar kind of like cockpit design. The 220 is an Airbus. C-17 is a Boeing product, so little differences here and there, but honestly, it was very intuitive. They fly differently, like they land differently, which is probably the biggest difference. C-17 lands on the backside of the power curve, right? It's kind of unique in that regard. Pretty much every other airplane lands on the front side of the power curve.
Can you explain that?
Yeah, C-17, it's for like short field landings and stuff, right? So like you fly so slow in the C-17 on the backside of the power curve on final, you actually add power to flare plane, right? So like you advance the throttles instead of a normal airplane, you're in the flare, you're like pulling power, pitching up and then just sort of settling down to the runway, right? But like in a C-17, you have a fixed pitch, you're controlling your vertical with the power because you're on the backside of the power curve, which I'm not an aeronautical engineer, but like, there's the famous, aviation power curve that applies to pretty much all powered flight, right? And the C-17 actually was designed to operate on the backside of it so it could fly slower and land in a shorter distance. And that's kind of the main thing it does really well is it lands and, it can land on dirt on a, few thousand feet.
Yeah.
Are you pretty remarkable?
Do you have the spoilers in a certain mode when you're landing?
Yeah. The spoilers deploy, so.
Those probably help a lot for the backside of the power curve.
They help a lot when you're flying on final. The thing that really stops the plane is the brakes. It's C-17 has like super strong brakes.
Does it?
Yeah, the combination of flying slower, spoilers, brakes, and then you're touching down pretty firm.
Are you?
So.
Yeah, you don't want those airline passengers to feel that.
No, you're
in the A220.
Yeah, your C-17 assault landing would frighten the average airline passenger. Yeah. I mean, it frightens a lot of the military passengers, honestly.
Like, what happened?
I think they know what to expect,
Yeah.
Like, guys have been flying on C-17s long enough. They know, like, probably fasten our seatbelts.
Right. I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. It's aggressive.
And it's like.
And a lot of guys probably make it overly aggressive,
And it
because it's fun.